Welcome to this initial installment of the Don Olgave Care Colloquium at SOM. Our program will get started in a few moments, but before the official launch, I thought it would be, and the team thought it was appropriate, for me to spend some time thanking some special guests and giving you a sort of background of the genesis, both of the colloquium and of CARE. Okay. So let me begin by extending thanks to my staff who have helped set this all up, who have worked tirelessly the last few weeks and months to put this into effect. Kristen and her team at our Office of Inclusion and Diversity, a special thanks to you. I want to thank the Alumni Relations team who have been hard at work to help this get set up. And I'd also like to thank CARE, members of which are in the audience, both for this year and previous years. I'll describe CARE in a few moments, but thanks so much to all of you for coming. I see Jordan here, CARE 1. Good to see you. Yeah. I want to thank some special guests before we get going. Most special of all, of course, are Don's children, whom I met earlier today. Of the many incredible things your father did, I hazard a guess that we would be most proud of the amazing humans he produced. It is an honor for you to be in our company. Thank you so much for coming. You know, as dean, one is supposed to care equally about every class. They're all the same. They're all excellent. Class of 2021, 2014, they're all the same. But shortly after I took the job, I got a sense that there was a very special class. The Charter Class, they call themselves. We call them. There's a class of 1978, the first class at the school. Members of that class are with us. Thank you for coming. Don was, of course, a member of that class, and so their presence here bespeaks the very powerfully positive view they had of him. The first person to have a window into the quality of the class and of the things that went into making Don the special person he was, of course, the person running admissions in that year. Yeah? Jane Donaldson is here. So she saw Don and saw the rest of the charter class before any of us. Thanks so much for coming back to join us today, Jane. Yeah? There are alums joining us by Zoom. I want to thank them for participating in today's event. Thanks for coming. So the background and context. How did we get here? What are we doing? What's the genesis of this thing? How did it come to be? So I'll tell you a bit about the history of 2020-ish. It was a confluence of events that raised considerations of anti-racism and inclusion to the front of our minds as a school. This is not to say that these matters had not long been of interest and focus and concern to the school, but the events of a relatively short window, 14 months or so, gave these events fresh force and fresh urgency. There was, of course, the COVID pandemic, which affected the whole world, including our world. But as we looked around, those of us here at the school, scholars, students, staff, we noticed that COVID's bad effects were not evenly distributed across the human family. That in the first few months, deaths were concentrated in certain places and among certain peoples. As a society adjusted to COVID, we learned about a phenomenon called an essential worker. You remember that? Someone who had to come in and pick up, do food delivery from grocery stores or clean. And we noticed that the composition of these essential workers itself was not randomly drawn from the population. Do you see? And so in a way, COVID exacerbated and made more plainly evident inequities that should concern us. So that was one kind of impetus. In the middle of COVID, there was, of course, the George Floyd murder. And the George Floyd killing at the hands of the police raised all kinds of issues, concerns, terrors, anxieties, frustrations, rage, yeah, in the minds and hearts of many, many persons, including people here. You will recall that there was a national reckoning, rethinking race institutions' role in helping to, if not eradicate, then to slowly diminish racial injustice and racial tensions. You remember. If I had to identify two major drivers, I would say it's COVID and the national racial reckoning spawned by the George Floyd killing. I was, at that time, relatively new in the deanship. And so there's another set of considerations as dean that I'm weighing. I'm looking around and I'm thinking about the composition of our school. Yeah? Who are we? Who is here? Yeah? What communities are we not reaching? What topics are we not teaching? That kind of thing. So that's not a force that came from without. That's something that we as a community and I as dean was wrestling with. And so I thought, would it not be nice? Would it not be useful to create some mechanism by which the expertise, the insights, the experiences of our broad SOM family, our broad family, could be brought to bear on helping to achieve the inclusivity, the mutual regard and respect, the sensitivity, the understanding, the caring, as it were, that we want to achieve at the school. So the idea was to bring together a community, this body, that drew from all of the constituent groups that make up our school. Sitting students. And so the committee has at least 2 students currently enrolled. It has at least 2 alums. It has faculty. And it has staff. It's our whole family. And the point of the committee is to help us, as I said earlier, better achieve ends that we've long aspired to. And then to bring to the deans and the school's attention considerations that we might not have emphasized but ought to. By composing it the way we did, the goal was to help remove the cross-silo problem we have at the school, and you have at your institutions, where I play a particular role and I don't talk to what's his name in a different role. Do you see? So we have students talking to staff, faculty hearing staff at the first, kind of like that. Yeah? Our community, this thing we created, was intended to give voice, to allow for the bubbling up or across of ideas, concerns that a particular person or group might have that would not otherwise make their way, these ideas, to the dean's ears. Yes? The point of care was to, for example, help us, as I said earlier, do better things we've long tried to do. What have we long tried to do? We need to recruit a more diverse class every year. We try different things. We try different things. CARE can help us with its ideas. We like to celebrate the people who comprise the school, their ethnicities, their backgrounds. How can we do that better? How can it be more vibrant and inclusive? CARE helps us with that. There are many, many other kinds of things it does, but one of the things I said was, over the course of the year that these persons just described served on CARE, the hope was that they would bring to the dean's office recommendations about things we might implement. Yes? So they met for months, working hard. I would pop in at a meeting. They talked about all kinds of things. And I remember well the day when I sat and they said, well, here's our proposal list. Yeah? And so they brought the proposals forward. They had thought about them hard. They had thought about them carefully. We weren't able to implement every proposal immediately, but there were 2 that jumped out right away. One was the creation of what is called a vodcast, which is a description, a taping. It's not a podcast, but with video is what I'm trying to say. Yeah? Podcast with video, where people describe their experiences, how they got to be at the school, what it meant to be, you see? If you came into the building today, as you walk around our building, you will see that vodcast playing on our screens around the school. I love it. The school likes it. I'm grateful to them for their creativity, the care group. The second idea they brought to us was, they said, Dean, could we implement something that occurred at regular cadence, that would be a permanent fixture at the school, permanent fixture? And they said, what about if we have a colloquium? I'm an academic. I like colloquia. Yeah? Colloquia bring different voices together. Yeah? Have people exchange points of view, have expertise shared, that kind of thing. So I said, this sounds good. I'm intrigued. And the more they talked, the more I thought, we're definitely doing this. This is great. That's a colloquium. But then the question becomes, what do we call the colloquium? We could, for example, call it the SOM anti-racism colloquium. Yeah? I remember sitting next to Mark, who was, I don't know where he is. There he is. And we were studying the name. What do you think of the name? And then Mark had this file folder thing. And he slid it next to me and he said, he circled somebody. And he said, what about this guy here? He taps like that. And as they're presenting it, I'm reading the rest of the file folder. I'm reading about this extraordinary person who did these amazing things, who in the way he lived his life is in some ways the best, the most ideal personification of what we wish to produce at the school. And I said, this is fantastic. We're going to name this thing, this permanent fixture at our school, after Don Olgave. That's how our colloquium got to be named what it is. You've heard a little bit about Don Olgave today. I want to say a few more things before I shut up and turn the stage over to others. Don's personal, academic, and professional life demonstrated in these various lives, he demonstrated unwavering advocacy for racial equity at the School of Management, at Yale, and in the society more broadly. He was an extraordinary person. I did not know him. I've gotten to learn much about him over these last few months. He was active in New Haven as a student. As a student. He didn't wait till he was a student doing stuff. Yeah? He focused on jobs and educational opportunities for Black New Haveners. He helped establish a center that sits today and is a home to which Black students can repair in times of college is difficult. Remember? Yeah? They have a place. That's partly Don's creation. Yeah? This charter class is important that he was a member of the charter class, because it turns out that the school's orientation, its sense of mission, what it is, what it's aspired to do, its traditions, were in a way formed by the charter class. We don't mimic everything that occurred in 1979 and 78. But what they did then informs what we do still. Yeah? And that he played a role in that is no small thing. He continued to support the school after he'd left. He was a dedicated alum, I am told, bringing ideas and insights and energy to things. As I reflect on his life, I'm struck by the fact that he was a person of action, of doing and delivering. He was a man of action and a man of service. Service animated by a set of values and beliefs, sterling values and beliefs, that are incredible to reflect upon. He had a successful career in business. He had a successful career in public service. Yeah? He had a successful career in society writ large. when I think about one person inhabiting those different roles and inhabiting them well, and I reflect on our motto, I think, what an amazing leader for business and society. That's in our motto. How appropriate, therefore, that this colloquium, which will occur annually forever, we hope, is named in his honor. Again, thank you so much for coming. I want to now turn the microphone over. I want to start the official event. And I'm going to turn things over to Jamila. And Jamila Afston Mayfield is an EMBA graduate of our school from the 2017 class. Jamila was a member of the Inaugural Care Group, so I got to know Jamila in that context. The Inaugural Care Group was amazing. It's almost like the charter class. You're fantastic. Fantastic. And 3 or 4 of them are here today. I'm very grateful for that. Jamila is a dedicated alum, friend of CARE and of SOM more generally. We're incredibly honored to have her lead this important conversation. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Oh, no. Good evening. And it is a good evening. I am so excited to be leading this discussion on this inaugural colloquium and this honoring of your father, and now a man that we all have gotten to know, Don Olgave. So I'm just thrilled. Thank you, Dean Charles, for that wonderful introduction. And I got some introductions of my own that I don't think that the panelists knew I was going to do, but I'm going to do them one by one, and they can come up as I intro them, and then we'll get started. So first, we'll start with Mei Ling Wang. Mei Ling is a superstar Yale student. Like, she is the epitome of superstar. She's a student government leader and a member of the Black Business Alliance, Private Equity and Venture Capital Club, and the Crypto Club. We'd like to ask you some questions about that. She also participates in the Women in Management and the Consortium. Her professional experience includes several years at Charles Schwab, internships at McKinsey, a current internship with Harlem Capital, and a part-time investor role in the Dorm Room Fund. Welcome, Mei Ling. Next up is Judith Scimone. Judith is the Chief Talent Officer and Human Resources Lead at MetLife. She has held previous roles at Johnson & Johnson, Google, Motorola, and Bank of America. And she began her career as a mechanical engineer for GE. So she's pretty much done like every industry from hearing about that. While on campus, she started the Black Business Alliance and has remained connected to Yale via several speaking events and presentations through the years. Thank you for joining us, Judith. All right. Lofton Holder is the co-founder and former managing partner of Pine Street Alternative Asset Management, LLC. Prior to creating Pine Street, Lofton spent over 30 years at Investcorp, JP Morgan, and the First Boston Corporation in a variety of client and senior executive roles. Lofton is an independent director of Golub Capital BDC and Manning & Napier. Lofton is engaged in the community, and like Judith, he shared his story in a past Yale SOM Black History Colloquium hosted virtually in 2021. Welcome back as our most recent person here, Lofton. And, I didn't mention the years of graduation. So Mei Ling is still a student. Judith graduated in 2000. We get to the 90s with Lofton, and we kind of saved our patriarch for last. And Fred Terrell is a graduate of the 1982 class. He is a senior advisor at Centerbridge Partners and an esteemed board member to many Fortune institutions. I did some digging on Fred because he has such a storied career. Fred had a tremendous career from 1982 to 1997 with Credit Suisse, so much so that he ultimately returned in 2010 as Executive Vice Chairman of Investment Banking and Capital Markets. In between the Credit Suisse tours, Fred founded Provender Capital Group, LLC. He has served and still serves as a board member and at times as chairman of the board at Carver Federal Savings Bank, Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, New York Life, Vroom, Paramount, Bank of New York Mellon, just to name a few. Seriously, go to his LinkedIn. There are so many board seats that he has held, and we are happy to have him join us today. Welcome, Fred. Take your time, Fred. You know we're going to wait on you. All right, we're going to dive into these questions because we know this will be a fruitful conversation, and I feel like the time is going to fly. So the first question is really about diversity and inclusiveness in our current financial services industry. So a more diverse and inclusive financial services industry that reflects the communities and clients that we serve is not only the right thing to do, but it is a business imperative. Research has shown that companies with more diverse workforces perform better financially and are more successful. And this is, not even new news. This is old news. With examples from either your Yale SOM or career experiences, can you share how you've created an inclusive workplace and how it benefits employees, clients, and the overall economy? And Judith, given your role at MetLife, we're going to start with you.
Sure, happy to. It's interesting. We've been talking about diversity, and diversity is a business imperative. And I remember when I left SOM, we were talking a lot about the business case for diversity. And at the time, it seemed appropriate because there wasn't necessarily the connection. As time has gone on, I've even found myself getting a little bit tingly hearing about the business case for diversity, and I'll tell you why. Because at the time, we talked a lot about, economics, spending power, where the consumers were, et cetera. We started talking about representation, and over time, the conversation morphed to be a little bit too transactional for me, a bit too much. Do this, get this, and I see diversity as much more powerful than that, and much more essential. To your point, imperative because it's essential. Diversity is business. Nothing happens without diversity. And in the talent space, it's interesting because I often remind organizations that I'm a part of and that I get the pleasure to speak at that, when you think about talent, we talk about strong talent, strong pipelines, and I say strong equals diverse. It's not strong but diverse, strong, but diverse but strong. It's not diverse and strong. You don't have strength in your talent pool unless it is diverse. And I think that that's important because when you start to think of it as a result or a consequence, it's just equal. I think that's the way we need to start thinking about it. And that's pretty important to me. So you asked about the companies and what companies do to drive that inclusivity. I think that's one of them. It's a mindset shift away from this transactional thinking about diversity and more to its essential nature. And it's being equated with strength, because it is, period, end of story. So I think that's one. And I think that mindset shift changes how you do a lot of things, particularly from an inclusion standpoint. It just changes your relationship with your workforce. It changes your relationship with your customers. It changes everything. It changes your commitment and your purpose. And so that's what I'll start with, and then open it up for others.
I love that. I love that about focusing on mindset and it just being strong. Diverse is strong. I love that. Strength. Fred, anything to add there?
Yes, but I want to start with something else. I have a bad voice here. I'm on the back end of a cold. I want to say something to the Ogilvie family. You can never be a member of the charter class unless you were a member of the charter class, so that's hanging over everyone's head forever. You just couldn't be there unless you were there at the beginning. So about your dad. Don Olgave was like the old Egyptian movies, the biblical movies. It was like looking into the sun. You know, you're not supposed to do that. Something will happen to you. He was truly, I mean this, he really was the unattainable to a lot of us. He really was the role model that we were all seeking to achieve. We wanted to be Don Olgave. I never met your dad. I only knew him by reputation. Even to this day, when I hear it, and when I see the honor that he is getting today and what you're hearing about him, it still feels that way because he really represented the best in all of us and what we wanted to be. And I would also say to you that there's no greater gift than a man can give to his family, or a great gift that a man can have than to know that his family is doing well. And looking and seeing all of you, I'm very proud to know you, to finally meet you, and to tell you personally what an influence, without even knowing him, Don Olgave had on my life. So I just say that to start with. It's really great to be here today. I think that Judith really hit on it. For me, I think it's not about, you said transactional, which I think is a good way to describe what diversity has become in many settings, in board settings. When I think of it as fundamental fairness. I don't have to get to the numbers. I can get to what's fair. You know, so much of what this country is and our place in the world and our history, you know, was not designed that way. It just became that way. No one had to justify the enormous disparity between African Americans and black and whites. It was there. It was unfair. So I think we're getting back to fairness. And the idea of trying to justify it with numbers always sort of struck me as very odd to do. I really get to the first point is that why wouldn't we all have the same opportunities? Why isn't this country belong to all of us? That's the starting point and the ending point. So for me, that's the place I start. And within the workplace, my view was to always provide the same story around this topic to all audiences, not just to African American audiences or people of color, to my white friends, to my black friends, to my Latino, to my Asian friends. You know, I was always telling, I hope, the same story about fairness and what it meant to be a part of an organization that treated you well or not so well based on your performance and who you are and the content of your character, if you will. So I appreciate what you said and how you defined it. It really has a lot more to do with where you start. And where I start is trying to create an environment where everybody has the same opportunity. And when that doesn't exist, I'm really in your face about it. I just don't think it works for me. And the more you're upfront and you tell that story directly, the more people learn, and it's a hard lesson sometime. But I think it's, you know, incredibly necessary, and so that's sort of been the thing that I try to hold true to.
If I could just add just one small concept to the conversation, and that is the one thing I've tried to add to the whole diversity discussion is making sure that all voices are heard. I think that's a critical component, and by all voices, I can remember being at First Boston with Fred and having a place to go to have discussions and real discussions, but more so than our discussions even, you know, going to the mailroom and talking to folks in the mailroom about what it's like working in the mailroom. I serve on the board of a hospital today, and peak COVID, going in and talking to not just, and very important to talk to the doctors and the nurses, but the janitorial staff, the food staff, and making sure those voices are part of that opportunity discussion, and that their needs are being heard and factored into decisions that we as board members and policymakers here. And I think that's an important component that needs to be factored in order to create that environment that you referred to.
Maylin, I saw you pick up your mic.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add that last year in executive, we started talking about diversity and the business case for diversity. And I believe after the second or third lecture talking about the business case for diversity, you know, I'm sitting in that class, one of 4 Black students, you're starting to feel a little bit icky. Like, we don't have to prove the business case for any other race, right? It's just for Black students. And it's very hard to describe that uncomfortability of being in that room and having to explain why there needs to be a business reason for us to be here. And so for me, I try to combine it with it's just the right thing to do. And I really appreciate you talking about it just being fair, right? We need to sort of move away a little bit from this conversation of, you know, we need it because of the business case, but it's just reaching that level of fairness.
I love the diversity of perspective here, right? We started with the strength, which I completely agree with, fundamental fairness, right? And in your face about it when it's not there, right, Fred? Lord, you know, Lofton, you brought it home with everybody, not just the client-serving professionals, not just the folks in the trading desk and the investment professionals, everybody. And then, you know, to your point, Maylin, like even as a student, knowing that you don't want to go into a world where people are having to justify why you're in there, that's not the diversity you're looking for. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. All right, I'm gonna move to the second question. Research has shown again that failing to address the racial wealth gap has cost the US economy trillions of dollars in recent decades, revealing that it is not only imperative to address this wealth gap for the sake of individuals and families, but really for the sake of our country. Can you share the direct and indirect effects that you being in the leadership seats you've been in has helped to solve for these disparities in diverse communities? And Fred, with all those leadership seats, I'm going to start with you.
You know, the opportunity that I got at SOM, thanks to some people in this room, Jane Donaldson, Ken Colburn, people who really helped me develop an approach to a career that I didn't know much about. What I've learned over time that it's important for all of us. You said something important about reaching out to people who don't traffic where we do and so on. I think that is incredibly important. I think for me, in the settings I've been in, I've tried to be inclusive about bringing people in of all stripes, tribes, and the rest, and talk to them about my own career and to be, you know, to be down about it, to really be truthful about it, its challenges, the opportunities. We were having a conversation earlier about you know, the change of thinking about careers, and when we look into corporate settings and we don't see enough people of color, we think, how can we improve that? One idea we were talking about earlier is to think about our roles as principals as opposed to as agents. You know, there have been various stages of progress with respect to the experience of diversity in corporations, but you know, it's developed over time. You know, starting with us being interested in jobs like investment banking or consulting or advising, but ultimately we all talk to each other and we know that the real difference is now getting to the idea of being a principal and a person who really understands how to make the engine run is really a valuable experience. Having people understand the opportunity to get there, how to change their careers around, how to look at their careers in a way that leads them to a place where they can have decision-making authority over making the pie bigger and better is what is important to me. You know, it doesn't just mean, by the way, a bigger slice of the pie. It really means expanding the pie altogether so you can share those opportunities with people who don't come from where you come from. But I think, you know, in my experience, it's always been important to really bring people inside, to give them a sense of what they could accomplish not only through their work, but through networking, through leveraging others, through being a good partner to others, to being a good listener, not only to yourself, but also to what people have to say. So it's still a lesson I'm learning over time, but I think these are really important things to success and to creating an environment that is actually more proactive with respect to some of these tough issues, is giving people a chance to understand that they all have relevancy and something to say and something to add to the problem solving that we're talking about today.
Lawson, I know you have some thoughts on this. You shared some back in 2021 on, our Black History Month podcast, but more to share about this.
I think I go back to my very first day at SOM, and I had some very famous finance professor, and he comes into the room, and I've got my pencil sharpened, sitting in the front row actually, because I was really excited about this finance professor, and he put up on the board with his back to the class, "Cash is king." And I remember, and then walked out. And I remember sitting there and saying, I'm coming to Yale to learn cash is king? I could go to 110th Street and Fifth Avenue. All right? And I could tell you cash is king. But, and so I really started to personally question, what was I going to get out of this experience? And really, what is there to learn? And I was here to fundamentally begin the process of addressing that racial wealth gap. That's why I came to Yale. That is something I was keenly focused on. My communities were capital starved. The irony is, for me personally, I did learn more about how to finance projects. I did learn more about capital allocation. I did learn more about accounting. But the true learning really happened not only in my OB classes, organizational behavior classes, the individual and group learning classes, but it was also a lot of personal growth with my classmates. And that really was a big part of my SOM experience, was that individual learning and the experience of being around people who had shared values that were concerned about the world and those inequalities and how to think about business, government, and not-for-profit sectors in solving those problems. And it's something I continue to focus on today, and it's something that, the problems are out there. We're working, we're chipping away, and we got a lot of work to do. So hopefully the community really does focus on continuing to solve those problems.
That's great. Judith, Maylin, anything to add, or?
What you inspired for me was the fact that we've all come to this institution because we have that passion around making an impact, and I think what I think is really important, one, is the passion and the focus and the intent, because you have to be purposeful. A lot of things don't happen by accident. It happens because you intended to make it happen. I think, two, knowing where you want to play and understanding the ecosystem, how money flows, how decisions are made, what factors influence those decisions, what you can do to help change those factors if you need to. I think that becomes really important. And that's what I appreciated about the experience here, is because whatever discipline you go into, you get this ecosystem perspective that enables you to actually go, you know what, I'm not going to make a difference unless I can influence how people make decisions to invest time, money, resources, et cetera, and I can change those things and apply your passion that way. And that was really something that I didn't realize how important that was, but as you grow and see how decisions are made, you understand that if you can do those things, it's really helpful, and you can impact anything. Just decide that. And as we listen to the stories this evening, it was a similar thing, right? Understand the ecosystem, have a passion, and decide, I'm going to make an impact. How do you do it? And you see the lasting impression, that the examples that we've heard tonight even one person being able to do that, in partnership, of course, with colleagues, and friends and classmates, but that focus and determination, applying that smarts to that will and that passion, that's what, that for me is the magic.
And I'll add, it's really interesting, Lofton, what you shared about you came to school to try to sort of reduce that racial wealth gap. And it's interesting being here because I wrote my essay about the same thing coming to SOM. And so prior to coming to school, I was a financial advisor at Schwab, where I was 1 out of 5 Black female financial consultants in the whole country. And at the beginning of 2020, we're sort of taking inventory of who are my clients, who are my colleagues, and there's no one around, right? And as I thought about coming to business school and I'm speaking to mentors, somebody had actually, somebody asked me, have you thought about venture capital? And at the time, I had never heard about venture before. And so it's interesting even being at the institution because sometimes I speak to undergrads at Yale that have done internships in venture, and this is something I just learned about a few years ago. And so coming here, a lot of that sort of drive to reduce the racial wealth gap is trying to spur a little bit more of entrepreneurship and venture in the MBA program, because we're not traditionally sort of an entrepreneurial institution, but there is so much opportunity there to sort of reduce that racial wealth gap by trying to put more dollars towards supporting founders of color and pursuing entrepreneurship.
It's so good that you brought that up, Malin, and it's a full circle of the entire conversation, right? Fred's talking about being in the right spaces, the right roles that can get you to be an owner, to be the boss, to control the P&L, to make decisions, right? And then to your point, you came here after experiencing what it's like to be a part of the team, right, at Charles Schwab. Shout out to Schwab if anybody's there. We like Schwab. But now recognizing how much more inspired and impactful the direction you want to travel, which is in venture capital, and it being a charge, maybe one of the charges you leave with Yale to continue to flourish and grow and offer opportunities to do that. So love that.
Can I also say that?
Absolutely.
That the beauty of SOM, as someone who didn't have any sense of financial markets or investment banking, when I say I didn't have a clue, I didn't know what snow was. I had never been outside of California, so it was a long way back, But it allows different people to have an entry point to what is business and management. Certainly it provided me with an entry point that might not have existed at any other school. And what was gratifying was to be around people who were not judgmental about that. We were all together collectively, building something that was very different. I'm not so sure we were aware of it all the time. But it really, whatever people think about SOM today, and I think all of you who go here today and all the alums, I'm sure, are quite proud of and I'll say diversity in a different way, the diversity of influences that make the discussion so rich. And in my case, again, provided an entry point that I could work with. I could be a part of a discussion, even though I had a purely public sector background, and I assumed that I would continue after Yale to pursue something in the public sector. I ended up going into investment banking, who knew? But without the chance to attend a school that gave you credit for what you were potentially, what was your potential, as opposed to what you had been, without a dad or a mom who had been in the industry, without growing up in a neighborhood in my neighborhood, I didn't know anybody that wore a white shirt. It never even dawned on me that people had a job as a professional. My father was a janitor. He's a very proud, dignified, brilliant man, but no sense of anything that was going on 3,000 miles away in classrooms where kids were the beneficiaries for years. But that may have, if I had gone someplace else or had the opportunity, I may have been surrounded with people who would have been much more judgmental about that and would have placed me in a category that would have held me back. I felt like my classmates embraced me as someone who had something to say, because there was enough going on here. There was room for everybody to sit at the table. That's the beauty of SOM. Actually, that's the power of SOM. And I'll use the word gratifying again now and today. You find so many schools trying to get to the same place we have been for over 40 years. They're waking up to the idea that there is power in diversity of opinion. They want more of that. You know, we're all the beneficiaries of what, you know, people like Dean Donaldson, people who had the vision to start the school, what they did. You know, I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now, but knowing of what I want to be my contribution and knowing more about how to get there has been a very important thing in my life, and I think still is really the thing that separates the school from others today.
Spot on. I mean, we've all said it, but being an IMBA graduate, which is a little bit of a different flavor, you really do feel the diversity, right? So, you know, our program is sustainability, healthcare, and asset management. Now you throw, you know, those different perspectives in one room, and I mean, the goal ultimately is to change the world, because if you kind of bring those industries together, we can make an impact, right? But to your point, Fred, like I was in some of those sustainability classes, like, listen, I do not know what we're doing right now, right? But, you know, some of my colleagues felt the same when they would join some of the finance classes, but there was no shame. It was all about sharing, learning, educating each other, and I hope that is still the vibe. I assume it is, and I think that's the magic of SOM. All right, so moving to one of those questions that, you know, we hear, but I'm gonna do a twist on it. We often hear about the gender pay gap, but less often discussed is the investing gap. According to research by Bank of New York Mellon, if women invested at the same rate as men, there would be an additional $3 trillion of assets under management. $3 trillion, ladies. Okay. We know these effects can also be extrapolated amongst communities of color. Yale's SOM's CARE members felt strongly that forums like this today can help close the investing gap by creating exposure of diverse career paths and successful role models. I mean, these are certainly some successful role models. What other ways can Yale SOM and the financial services industry help to close the investing gap? You know, Fred, you've done a lot of talking, so I might make Maylin kick it off, and then we'll go in order to get to seniority. How about that?
Sure.
How about never?
So I alluded earlier to my work at Schwab as an advisor. So to provide a little bit more context, I was spending my 8 to 5 or whatever my day work was, advising these clients, millionaires, high net worth individuals, on how to invest their money. And then on the side, I would go to South Central LA to teach financial literacy. So those two worlds were not combined. They were very separate, and nobody charged me or asked me to do that. It was just something that I was passionate about, but I had to do it on the side. I had to teach the workshop virtually at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. after I was done with my job. I had to go in on a weekend. And so as I think about those conversations compared to the conversations that I was having with my clients, they were entirely different. And so one thing I think is that we need more, you know, Black and brown women in the seats, because you need to be able to understand that the wishes, the needs, the comfortability with risk tolerance, the level of education is just different when you're speaking to communities that may not have engaged in investing before. So the conversation I'm having in South Central LA with a mom with 2 children or single mom is not the same conversation that I'm having with somebody who has $5 million trying to set up a trust for their children. And so what I think about, when I think about my legacy and sort of the things that I think can try to sort of bridge the racial wealth gap, and then thinking about gender as well, is having more people in those seats. And I think Yale is a perfect institution to sort of build the leaders and inspire the leadership that's needed to go out, do the job, but also do the and society. to not only, go into investment banking or consulting or whatever you're pursuing, but truly embody the leadership of the end society and ensuring that you have more knowledge and you can share that with the communities and encourage people and understand that because of that different level of comfortability, it might take a little bit more, but by doing that, you can actually try and begin to make a difference.
Love that. And thank you for your commitment, to what you're doing on the side, as you say. Passion projects, so meaningful for that community. Judith, what do you think?
I love what you said. And I would say, do it here. Do it now. Do it with communities, this community. We don't have to wait until we leave New Haven or Connecticut or the Northeast to do this. This institution is here now. We're gaining this knowledge now. To whom much is given, much is required. Make that impact now, here, in the community here in New Haven. That's what I would add.
Lofton, anything to add there?
Not much, other than just a little bit of experience, maybe. Because, partly what Pine Street was created to do was provide seed capital to women and minority-owned hedge funds. And we started out to do that because we saw, frankly, a huge disparity in the way capital was being allocated. We saw a huge disparity in the way capital was being allocated to what theoretically was a skill and pure skill-based asset class. And we didn't think skill resided in only one demographic. And so we thought and set out to prove, and I think we were successful in doing that, the opportunity set to make money by investing in women and minority-owned businesses was very real. Now, we had to build very unique infrastructure to demonstrate that skill. So we built a whole quantitative metrics around how do you prove out that skill, rather than just invest with people you knew or were comfortable with. We also built out pretty rigorous operational infrastructure and compliance infrastructure for oversight, all to attract institutional capital. With that said, it was still hard, right? It was still hard to convince people that there was talent out there that was undercapitalized. That's arbitrage, folks. That's an economic opportunity, and change is hard, and that's the opportunity, but it's also very, very difficult to get the market to move, and that's the challenge I think we're still in today. I still think we are facing that, and we will continue to fight the fight because, to Fred's first point around the opportunity and fairness, ultimately it's a fairness and opportunity game that we deserve to be part of the asset management industry and to be owners, principals in that conversation, and not just workers or agents. So that's what I would.
Fred, anything to close this one out?
Only just a couple of kind of related comments. I'm a feminist for a long, long time. I think it's pretty obvious that without sexism, men would never be where they are. It's a perfect tool. It has all the same things around, about the experience of African Americans and people of color. You can see how many baller women there are out there who are killing it. Look at look at the numbers, and I think that tells you everything you want to know. So, I think, it's an environment in which we're getting better about all of it and exposing all these imperfections in society, and I'm very hopeful about it. But, I've always tried to be inclusive with respect to working with all comers, but particularly women, because I thought I really wanted to make the bridge, and I really would go to women, often white women, and say, you've got to see the world the way I do. You really have to see it because we're in the same bucket. And when they didn't, I was disappointed, and I would tell them, you got to be with me on this. It's not about them, it's about you and me, because that connection was powerful, and I tried to hold them to account when they were in senior positions. You've got to hire some brothers and sisters. Or what are you doing? How do you think you got there? So I still feel that way, but that's how I explain sexism, because I think it was a tool that men needed to sort of keep women in a place, and without it, with less of it, you can see what happens. Women prosper, they become leaders of organizations, they drive the economy. So, we want more of that.
I personally love that, but I know I saw some head nods of the women out here in the audience, so thank you for that, Fred. I'm going to wrap up my last question, and then I want to get ready to take some questions from the audience. So you guys get your questions ready. This is a powerful panel, and they have some great insights, so please ask them. Final question, and we'll go in the same order, Maylin. I think you're ready. If you had to leave a charge to the SOM community, and that's faculty, staff, students, everybody, professors, everybody that's here, to do something impactful, do one thing, like starting top of 2023, right? We're winding this year up. What would that be based on your experiences, in the here and now? Maylin?
So I will focus on a charge to students and then a charge to faculty. So my charge to students is that what you said earlier, Judith, is to start now. I've had so many conversations with peers, with friends that, they say, I first need to focus on recruiting, I first need to build my wealth, I first need to do X, Y, Z, and then eventually when I'm in a position of power, then I will reach back, then I will help. And I always challenge my peers and I say, Yale gives you the broadest platform to be able to drive change today. And as you think about, getting that job or whatever other priorities that you came to school with, just think about recruiting and, getting that job and, like, what else can you do to continue to drive impact here? And then my charge to faculty would be, I'll share a story. So yesterday I was trying to finalize my classes for spring of 23, which will be my last semester. And I came across this class that I bid for. It's called Entrepreneurial Ventures in Consumer Products, I believe. And I saw that the professor or the lecturer is KJ Miller, who's a Black woman. And I got so happy. I was actually sitting with Julie and we were doing some work in the basement. And I got so excited that finally I get to take a class where there's alignment in the things that I'm interested in, and it's a Black woman who's teaching the class. And I thought for a moment, wow, it's gonna be my last semester at SOM that I experienced this joy. And so my ask to faculty would be, what can you do at top of 2023? We can't ask you to hire additional people, but you can introduce more case protagonists, have more guest lecturers of color, because you can give other students and serve the entire student body and give other students the joy that I felt.
I love those. Great. Start now. And yes. And we need some more diverse professors ultimately, but we can get lecturers real time. I'm looking at Dean Charles. Okay. Judith.
Yeah, why am I going after you? This is too hard. I would say, building off of what you said, I would say don't underestimate the impact that you have in the seat that you're in, and think about the unique value you bring. And the reason I say that is because when I think about even the Black Business Alliance in its form when we started it or restarted it in '99, I remember, I don't know, it must have been 3 nights of ramen noodles and whatever was going on back then in our little apartment, and talking to a classmate and thinking, we know we see an issue, and that's all we saw. Did we think, 20 years later, that organization, we still want this organization to be there? No. All we saw was an issue and an opportunity. And I was always taught, when you see a hole, plant a seed. Just plant a seed. And that would be what I leave with you, is you'll be so surprised at the seed that you plant and where it goes. I would never have guessed that we'd be talking in 2022 and BBA would still be alive. I just didn't. That wasn't even the intention. The intention was, we need a community here now. We have an opportunity to have our voice heard now, again. We have an opportunity, and I think that what I call you to do is, don't underestimate that. Don't think it has to be big, it has to be this, it has to be that. Just move.
Love that. You see a hole, plant a seed. And shout out to BBA. And I think that there's going to be a bit of a brunch maybe tomorrow with some of the members of BBA. So, I mean, it is not just alive, it is thriving. So thank you for reviving and planting that seed in 99.
I was going to add, most of the BBA leaders are here, so raise your hands.
Yes, raise some
hello.
hands.
Shout out to y'all.
Great. Lofton.
I think I'm going to leverage off the planting the seed concept, and that is, and tie it back to some earlier comments that I guess I had made about my experience here. I think as you seek change in the world, don't think of it as much as a head problem or a tools problem. Think of it as a heart problem. And so as you interface as a community, really focus on shared values and what we have in common, and not so much on the differences. And if we accomplish that, that change we seek will come if we do it together. So that would be my advice.
Shared value. I love that. All right. Fred, bring us home.
Just quickly, this has been great. I would just say what I've learned is that that innovation is at the seam. When you put two pieces of cloth together, that middle section, that's the most interesting thing. The public-private, for me, is really compelling. The people I happen to be most interested in life are people who see both sides, and they focus on the seam and in the middle somehow. They want to understand both. And I think that's true in the business world, in innovation, fintech. It's the fintech part of it that is the most fascinating. It's the joining of things that you wouldn't think that go together. That's where we learn more, and that's where we create new businesses. So for all the folks who are thinking about what to do, think about the combination of things and what the opportunities are created by the combination, not by either, or that's conventional thinking. The new thinking is about what that new product is, the blend of the two, whatever it is. So,
I love that. Focus on the seam. That's good. There were so many good quotables here. I hope you guys are keeping track, because we want to share these on social media. Before I open it up for questions, we're going to give them a round of applause at the end, but I want to give them a round of applause now. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for this wisdom. And with that, I will let, I think, is it Toby? Toby and Malcolm, thank you, Maylin, are going to manage the audience questions.
On care with them. It's been a great meeting all of you today. Thank you so much for your time. The question that I had is, would love to hear one thing that SOM has done really well, reach back out to you as alumni, but one thing that they could move on as we're, current leaders and trying to reach out to alumni to get back to campus, but soon we'll be alumni as well, and seeing what ways we can that.
I'll start out. I think one thing that SOM has really done well is ask Jamila to head this up and to host this. And frankly, she's the reason why I'm here. So very, very powerful. And I think the one thing to improve on is similar in that, and it's something we talked about earlier a lot in the room when we were in the room was provide forums like this to connect us to the Don Ogilvies and the Don Ogilvie spirits and the 1982s and the 1990s and the 2017s and the 2000s and the current students. I know I, for one, probably haven't been to campus enough and don't feel a presence with the students or my fellow alums as much as I should. So part of that community and shared values that I feel in this room is something that we could probably do better as a community.
I love that. And I'm going to thank you for that, Lofton, and thank Yale for continuing to reach out. And there is no shortage of reach outs, and I'll be back next year doing other things. I'm super excited about it. And I think that if this is the spark, right, that now we're starting to reach back, so we've got to figure out a way to, like you said, organically get us together to gather. Not to necessarily, plan some extravagant event. I love that you keep saying, Judith, start small. It doesn't have to be this, fantastical, conference or anything like that, but just to talk and meet. So I am one that I agree with that fully. You got to get us together and get us here. And I think after that, it'll just become more organic. Part of the reason we wanted to start with this dynamic panel was because we knew they would draw everybody else. And anybody that's watching this on Zoom, and I think anybody in this room, had to be inspired by this conversation. So my hope is that the folks that have been sitting on the sidelines that are alums get motivated to come back after this discussion. I know I saw Jordan's hand. Yes, a fellow CARE member.
Show yourself more grace. That's what I'd say.
He did. He said keep it short. Fred, what you got over there? Patience. Okay. Just general patience or patience with a career path? Okay. Yeah. I like that. Patience.
I actually wrote down, be patient with yourself, right? As you're impatient with the world.
Okay.
And so that is
Yeah.
something I would
Listen,
I
these
would
quotables
advise.
from Lofton, y'all. It's good. Maylin, you got anything? I know 10 years and you're still young, but still, you might have something. You might have something from high school you want to share. I don't know.
I was in college.
Oh, that's right.
I would say ask for help sooner.
Yes, I like that. Ask for help sooner.
Can I add one?
Yes.
Because what we've been talking about has been so powerful about community. And I think the one thing that's really been missing for me, especially when I think about SOM, is what you talked about. Just reach out and be the catalyst to create community. We are much more connected to each other than we are to any institution. And I think we've spent a lot of time focused on how we connect to the institution and we miss the magic, which is the conversations we had today. I feel like I know these guys quite well. We've already been talking about things. And I think just reach out and create community and don't think it's just going to organically happen. The connection to the institution happens because the institution facilitates it. if the connection to each other is not going to happen unless we facilitate it.
I really like that. You know, Oprah always says that there are no mistakes, there's just redirection and opportunity. And I really feel like when I was in my early 30s, I was like, I don't know about that, Oprah. Like, you make mistakes. Like, there's some left turns, right, that are not great. But honestly, now, Jordan, I think she's right. And I think having that 10 years of just seeing how things all turned out, it's just an opportunity to do something different, to pivot. So that would be what I think I've learned over the last 10 years. Yeah.
God, I don't know, but I don't know, but I can tell you that I appreciate the question. Something that I've advised interns and young people in the business, men and women, people of color and women, is that getting the nerve up to respond to something that is outwardly offensive is hard to do, but you have to do it. And I'll be more specific about women. You gotta call sexism when you see it, because if you don't, it's just license to do more. Everyone's testing a little bit. The same thing is true with racism or slurs or any of that stuff. You may look like you're a hothead, and you may say, "Well, I'll hold it back," but I just don't think you win that way. I think you got to figure out a way to step to it, because you have to say it's not acceptable, because people see it as weakness and they'll do it again. They're testing you. And so I think, I don't know how it worked for me, but I remember on several occasions calling somebody on something, and it may have changed my relationship, but more often for the better, because whether we became great friends or not mattered less to me than they would respect my line and what I thought about myself and me as a person. And I don't think anybody should ever, in any setting, sacrifice that, because that's the road down. And it's hard to do. I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing. Don't know where. I just thought it was important, particularly in the whitest of organizations like First Boston in 1981. Forget about it. Just forget about it. It was like, oh my God. So I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I know what I should do. And I know I would tell women about doing it when they hear it, about when you see that line cross, and you have to figure it out. So I'm not answering the question very well, but I appreciate it.
Yes.
That was the essence of how my father conducted himself. He respectfully but powerfully will tell you, if you cross a line, you have to talk about it. And that question is appropriate because it's named after him. And you respect yourself enough. The theme of tonight is to do what's right. So, very appropriate.
I see a question at the top. Thank you. Thank you, Toby.
Thank you all for being here today. I think my question is related to the one that was just posed. I remember during the MBA application process, a current Black SOM student at the time actually mentioned that during those times where the confrontation was necessary, he had learned how to identify when he should opt out, when he should opt in, and when he should distribute the workload. And so, like you said, this work is really hard, and I think it can be very emotionally and mentally taxing. And so maybe what I'm hearing is that we shouldn't be opting out, but I'm curious if you can talk about how you've approached maybe distributing the workload, especially in those times when it is particularly taxing on you as an individual.
I mean, building off of that question and the previous question, I think in the work that I do and in the roles that I've played, the way I show up in those moments and what I say and what I do and how I role model, standing out and standing up, is actually how I multiply myself, because it gives others license to do so. It gives them a template for how to do so. And I think that that's important, because I sit there and I go, there are 3 people in this room looking at me right now, and how I answer this question or address what this person said is not only going to send a message about how I feel, how this company feels, how we feel about this, it's going to give them the words that they need later. And I think about that. And so it's not, it might not be spreading, or I can't remember what the term is that you use, it might not be spreading the load in that instance, but it's multiplying myself, the message, by ensuring that every opportunity I have, I use it, quite frankly. And so that's just one small way, but it's an important one.
You got to call out anti-Semitism too. You got to call it out. I mean, you just have to. I mean, there's just no way to think that it's only a black issue, or you have license to do things. You know when you hear it, and you've got to be better than that too. And I just think there has to be an alliance of people who are good people, who see these things for what they are. That's how society gets better. So for all my Jewish brothers and sisters, this last few weeks has been a horrible time. You know where the country is now. You know there are people who feed off shit. You have to deal with it, because we can't get better without it, and we have no place to go when it happens to us, if you're an African American or if you're Latino or anyone else. So you know the difference. You'll hear it, but you can't foster it. You can't ignore it. You have to call it what it is and say it's unacceptable, because there's no way to pursue my agenda personally as an African American without looking out for people who are preyed upon with the same kind of rhetoric. So we don't have to talk about the details of what we've been hearing the last several weeks, but we all know. And that's the only way to sort of make sure that you're staying inside the lines, that you're being true to yourself. You can't defend your own cause without looking out for the causes of others who would feel the same way you would.
I just want to add, I like the way you framed the question about being taxed, because I do think minorities and women show up in the workplace and they take on a lot of roles, additional roles beyond the day-to-day. And so when these incidents happen, it does feel like a different tax. But what I do when I feel that is I say it. I think sometimes we try to figure out, how do I say this? What do I say? I will tell someone, you know what? I am fatigued with these conversations.
That's right.
I'll just pause, and then you get this look of, oh my gosh, where's this going? I'm gonna start over. Did you mean to say what you said? You can give them an opportunity, grace, right? Like 90% of people walk it back, right? Like, because if I say I'm fatigued with these conversations, did I hear you correctly? Were you saying, this inappropriate comment? Like, well, no, you get that. And then if it continues, though, because you have some bold individuals, I'm not going to have this conversation because I'm fatigued, but I probably won't have many more with you, because this is a line, to your point, Fred, that is not okay with me. And I do think what happens is a respect level goes up so high. And you got to be balanced in likability and respect. Women like, there's many books written on this, right? But respect matters more then, because you will continue, like you said, Fred, to deal with this over and over and over again. And there will be 10 people to come behind you and tell you they're so thankful you did it. Every time somebody else says,
I couldn't muster up the courage. I don't know how you did it, right, Fred? Like, but thank you for doing it. And give it time and space, you'll probably get an apology. That's the series. That's how it goes for me. I am fatigued. Did you mean to say this? Oh, you did? This is my line. People saying, oh my gosh, thank you so much. The person, I thought about what you said, I'm sorry. Great. We can move forward. Right? Like, have you guys not experienced it like that? So,
Over and over again. Yes.
tell them you're fatigued, see what they say.
The other thing I would add is, again, I've been harping on this a little bit, is at least for me, a strategy after I did that was to grab my colleagues in my community and say, I need to go for a walk. And truth be told, the firm I started up with former JP Morgan colleagues when we were 60 Wall Street is we always had a joke that meet me at Pine Street, okay, which was the back entrance to the building. And then we would go for a walk because you had to, all right? And the irony is the firm we built was called Pine Street because we felt like that was our back entrance in our safe harbor place to go for a walk, and sometimes you just had to walk that steam off, right? And so build those communities that enable you to, I think the term you used was distribute some of that as well and share it.
You're going to hear that theme.
You
a
are.
lot. We need each other. And you're going to get tired,
You,
right? Because you're fighting for something, but you're actually experiencing it at the same time. And so you're going to get tired. And so you have to prepare for that.